So the next section is identifying lease. So a contract is or contains lease if it conveys the right to control the use of an identified asset for a period of time in exchange of consideration. So there are two important aspects to a contract to be identified as a lease. Number one is the right to control the use, that's one, and then second is identified asset. So if there is a right of control, and then if you can identify an asset separately, then the contract is a lease contract. So now, what do you mean by control? Control is conveyed where the customer has both the right to direct the identified use and to obtain substantially all the economic benefits from that use. So control is again divided into two portions. So how do you know if lessee controls the asset? So again, the standard explains that where lessee has both right to use the identified asset and then can obtain substantially on the benefits from use. In that case, we regard it as a control. An asset is typically identified by being explicitly specified in a contract, but an asset can also be identified by implicitly specified at the time it is made available for use by the customer. So this is a specific case considered by the standard where even if a lease contract does not specify an asset, it can be still considered and identified if you can implicitly specify at the time it is made available for use by the customer. However, where a supplier has a substantive right of substitution throughout the period of use, a customer does not have the right to use an identified asset. A supplier's right of substitution is only considered substantive if the supplier has both practical ability to substitute alternate assets throughout the period of use and they would be economically benefit from substitution. So, in short, if the supplier, in our case the lessor, has the right to change or exchange the asset or substitutes the asset, then it is not regarded as an identified asset. A capacity portion of an asset is still an identified asset if it is physically distinct. Example, a floor of a building is you can easily make it physically distinct, so you can physically identify it, and it is considered as an identified asset. A capacity or other portion of an asset that is not physically distinct, example, capacity portion of a fiber optic cable is not an identified asset unless it represents substantially all the capacities such that the customer obtains substantially all the economic benefits from using the asset. So in this case they have considered an example of fiber optic cable. So if the fiber optic cable, the capacity of the fiber optic cable, you cannot identify as to how much portion specifically is used by the lessee. In that case there is no identified asset there. But if you know that the substantially all the benefits from that use of the fiber optic cable uh, is used by lessee, or the benefit is obtained by lessee, in that case the contract is identified, is you can identify that asset. Yeah. So in the next section we would look into specific questions to be asked in order to specify whether the contract is a lease. So the first question is there an identified asset? This next, if the answer to that is yes, then does the lessee obtain substantially all the economic benefits from the use of the asset? If the answer to that question is also yes, then does the lessee have the right to direct the use of an asset? If the answer to yes, then the contract is lease. If the answer to any one of these questions is no, then the contract does not contain lease and we have to check into the other applicable IFRS.